Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni moli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is a special Protecting the Planet with Your Kids edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts, part of this beautiful planet we all call home. My co-host, Alexia Brown, and I want to give you parents the information you need to talk with your kids about protecting our beautiful world. Alexia, who will our guest be today?
We are here today with Gary Hack, author of My Dad, the Earth Warrior. Hi, how are you?
I am, thanks. Thank you. It's great to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
I'm so excited to have you on the podcast to talk about your book, My Dad, the Earth Warrior. Could you just tell us a little bit about the story for those who haven't read it?
So, My Dad, the Earth Warrior is about a boy called Hero. He's actually the hero of the story. And he's increasingly feeling neglected by his bookworm dad and his globe-trotting gran. And since the death of his mother a few years ago, they've become a kind of distant relationship between the father and son. Then one day, the father has a bump to the head, and he wakes up claiming he is a Earth Warrior, the son of Mother Earth, and that he wants to go and protect the planet and do various strange things. So the story, and for poor Hero, then he's forced to go along with his father's new persona. So, for example, the father he discovers his father fishing in the river, practically naked. And then his father decides to set up an illegal camp on the local recreation area to protest against the fracking that is going on there. So as the story progresses, poor Hero has to deal with more and more strange things happening to his father and his new Earth Warrior persona. So he's desperate to get his father back. Should I continue?
Oh, that's great. That sounds like a crazy story. Oh my goodness.
It's a crazy story, and it's set within the context of a climate change. So the story starts when there's a heat wave, and what the father does he becomes an overnight media sensation because he decides to do a rain chant and calls the rain. But unfortunately, it's too much rain, and then there's flooding. So I'm trying to weave in through the whole story weather and climate, and the relationship between father and son, and how the hero can try and get his old dad back.
This sounds like a lot of fun. Your book is a middle grade novel, so I can absolutely imagine the kids that age, the 8 to 12-year-olds, 8 to 14-year-olds, really getting into this adventure with Hero and the dad almost naked fishing, and what a clever way to talk to kids about some really important subjects and get them some great information.
Yeah, I mean, for my background, I'm an environmental researcher, and when I started off, I've always dabbled in creative writing, and then I wanted to write a story, and I never had the intention of writing an environmental-based story. It was going to be just a fun story. And my inspiration for this book was when my daughter was born, and I was like dancing around the room trying to calm her down, thinking what an embarrassing dad. So it all stemmed from this idea of having an embarrassing dad. And then I like this idea of changing persona. So with Hero and his father taking on this new persona and becomes increasingly embarrassing, I then started to weave in the kind of environmental themes through all, and the kind of the new age guru kind of approach of an eco-activism. So I tried to bring that in, but it's really the context for the book, the environment, because today there's many books out there on the environment where the protagonist goes out to save the environment. In this book, what I think is slightly different is that the book really is about the relationship between father and son and within the context of environment. So it's actually looking at the environment in a slightly different way. So, yeah, I think it's an adventure book. So what I didn't say was, so when the Gran disappears, the father and son then have to go on another adventure to try and rescue Gran from this evil energy tycoon.
Wow, yeah. So it's really about like the relationships that kind of stem from the crazy world.
Yes.
I mean, when I got the pleasure of reading this, and when I was reading it, like, you bring up so many topics like solar energy, global warming, and fracking, and things like that. Is that what you study? Is that your area of expertise?
I mean, the kind of work I do as an environmental researcher, I'm very fortunate to work really from at the local level to the global level. So, for example, I've been working with communities in how they can reduce their carbon footprint. I've also worked at the national level in terms of advising environmental policy. And then at the global level, working in Asia on air pollution, in Africa on climate change and transport. So I've really gone from local to global. So I know how the actions that we take at the local level have an impact at the global level. And in some ways, this book is about, local action, demonstrating how local action can influence global events such as climate change and environmental problems.
You mentioned having a chance to work in Asia on air pollution. I think a lot of us don't, if we're living in our own little neighborhoods and things seem pretty clean and comfortable, and we don't realize that we're part of this huge world. I was sharing with Alexia before we started recording that we host international kids here in our home, and we've hosted a lot of kids from China. And I remember having a conversation with one of the young women who lived with us as she was preparing to go back to China. I said, what are you going to miss most about being here in the United States, in Boston? And she said, fresh air. And that really kind of just like a slap to the back of the head just helped me understand that this problem has some real consequences for people all over the world.
Yeah, I think it's some things like in the US or in the UK to take for granted clean air. If you go back to 1952 and you had the great London smog, which killed so many people, and that's the kind when you think about, say, the period of Sherlock Holmes, when you think about London smog, that was a visible kind of pollution, and that's to some extent the smog we've seen in China and in India and also in Los Angeles, this kind of visible smog. But today, even though certain countries, modern countries have progressed and have cleaned the air, there's more of an invisible kind of pollution now, which is a fine particulate matter from motor vehicles, for example, that can have an effect on your health. And even with school children, for example, in the neighbourhoods in London, where school children, there's high levels of pollution and the studies have found that it's affecting their health. So really the environment affects us, whether it's something we can see or even in form of an kind of invisible pollution. And you're right, we take it for granted probably in a more developed country when we can look out and see the blue sky. And where in other countries it's like what we had, at least in the UK, like in the Industrial Revolution, more black clouds and smog. So, yes, it's something, we need to do something about that. And I think children, they will inherit this planet and to inspire them now at a young age with books like this, which are hopefully are fun and not too serious, would be a good thing. And I remember one reviewer of my book, probably an environmental reviewer, said, "Oh yes, it's a really interesting book, but I'm a bit disappointed it didn't have more kind of like eco-activism." And that was something I didn't want to do so obviously. So it was very clear to write a book, you must do this, you must do that. This book is a storybook based in an environmental context, which hopefully makes it much more appealing and interesting for kids. And that's what I tried to achieve.
Yeah, in the story, I mean, Hero's dad's always trying to like force knowledge on him almost and get like kind of unwanted knowledge and facts all of the time. So, and obviously you didn't want to do that with all of your climate knowledge for children. So how do you think parents could best kind of go about helping their kids become more curious about all of the world around them?
I mean, I think these days the school curriculum probably it teaches environmental issues anyway. I know from my own daughter, but I think really it's when you go out for a walk to look around and to be inquisitive. So it's easy for us with our, in modern society with our technologies and the games and tablets and everything to just look down. I think it's when you don't have that technology, you walk around and you look and maybe probably as in lockdown, people notice the bird song much more clearly than they did in the past. So it's looking at nature and seeing animals, plants and things when you go walking to develop that connection. And then from that, then to talk about greater things such as why the weather might be changing, why it's different, why it's snowing when it should be hot, why there's rain when it should be the summer, to talk about that climate variability. So it's really starting off with that connection and curiosity about nature, I think.
I love that idea of encouraging kids, encouraging adults to put down the devices and look up. And we do spend so much time looking down, and we don't take the time to look up and just look at the sky. There was a meteorologist, TV weatherman here in Boston for years, and he started a campaign to just get people to look at the clouds. And this was back in the 70s, and it really caught on here. And suddenly it's all these people are looking at the clouds and kind of just envisioning all different kind of animals, but it's a great way to get people to be aware of their surroundings.
Absolutely. And there's a term called citizen science where you can get school kids and individuals to be involved in environmental research. So, for example, filling in surveys or looking for counting birds that may appear in the garden or looking for certain flowers. So as well as creating awareness and appreciation of the environment around you, it's also can have a very good way of collecting data for research. And with air pollution, going back to what you said about air pollution, we know that there have been studies where we have children who carry maybe an air pollution sensor on their backpack going to school to see the level of exposure. So this kind of people looking at the environment but also participating in these kind of like environmental data collection activities is a way of inspiring, especially children, to learn about the environment, but also providing useful data and information for research.
Wow, that's really cool. It's getting everyone involved and everyone participating almost.
Yeah.
I love that idea of empowering kids to help them understand. Kids feel so helpless sometimes, but to give them a way to say, hey, you are contributing. You're part of the solution. Look at what you're doing. What a great gift to give to kids.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to climate change, because we all know that when we started to learn about climate change and even some of the kind of communication about climate change is this kind of big, terrible apocalyptic event that is so big, so enormous that actually for some people think, well, I can't do anything about it, so I'm going to ignore it and carry on. And that is not really what we want. We've got to demonstrate if we are going to solve the problem of climate change that it's about showing that the action that we have at the local level and the voice that we have can have an impact into changing policy and making a contribution. So you're right. I think it's about when you talk to children about environmental issues rather than scare them, which the facts are scary, is to really demonstrate to show that, yes, okay, it's a problem, but you can do something about it. You can have a voice. And we've seen that with the climate strikes and Greta Thunberg, who said, you're never too small to make a difference. So it's that level of empowerment. And as I said, avoiding this kind of scaremongering and connecting more to nature and showing that you can make a difference and we all can make a difference. And that, a theme through this book was, be the change you want to see. Going back to that maxim, be the change you want to see.
Yeah, that is great. I definitely think empowering kids is a way better strategy than scaring them, for sure. Why do you think that there's a certain age level where you introduce those topics or kind of let kids like you said, go outside, explore, ask the questions, approach you about that topic?
I don't know. I think at least the kids in the UK seem to be more tuned on. And I think with Greta Thunberg and the climate strike, they're much more aware. They see it on the news. So I think they have in the background a knowledge of what's going on. And I think it has to be a natural thing when you encourage children to learn about environment, about air pollution, and then you relate that to climate change. I think they're terms that they're going to hear. So I think it comes naturally in the kind of general discussion, but showing an appreciation for nature, for the environment, and the importance of protecting our life support system, our Mother Earth, I think is probably a good way just to let it come naturally. And I think most kids, they either like animals or they want the furry animals, or they read about animals that might be endangered, and it stems from there. Then you progress on to more of the kind of environmental problems that we have.
Gary, early on you referenced London and the black clouds that covered London at the start of the industrial age. And that's an example of a country, of city making changes and making things better. Are there other success stories that we can tell our kids to, again, motivate them and empower them to know that they can make a difference, that our planet isn't doomed to destruction, that we can turn things around?
I think probably one of the most successful stories is the ozone layer and the banning of CFCs from aerosol sprays. Now that involved a global collaboration to reduce and ban this chemical in aerosols, and as a consequence of that, the ozone layer started to close. I haven't looked at the recent update whether it's opened again, but the last time it was always portrayed as a success story, and that it's a kind of global common. It requires global action. All countries working together, and that was very successful. So what I'm saying is that is an example of a success story on a global level. And when you come to climate change, it's the same kind of thing that we've got to aim for. That it requires everybody. And in some ways, it's a bit like the pandemic now with the COVID-19. We could get vaccinated, but if we're vaccinated and part of the population is not vaccinated, then we will be affected anyway. So there's a kind of, we depend on each other, that we're all vaccinated and we're all protected, because if one country is polluting and the other country may be suffering if they're reducing their impact. So we're all in it together. And it's that kind of international cooperation, national cooperation, and I think that is a big success story. Obviously, there's other actions that have been taken in cities where they've reduced car use, they've removed cars, they've banned the burning of particular kind of fuel, for example, wood burners, or in the past, one of the solutions for the 1952 smog that came after that was the Clean Air Act that actually banned the use of coal burning. So there are success stories out there. And it's about, again, being positive that we can do things and we can we can turn it around. And we have done in many different areas as well.
Yeah, and it can happen on a community level too. I know that there's a lot of times like big community levels, and even smaller than that, I think it can happen on a family level. And just your family taking actions to reduce their carbon footprint and help the earth. So at the end of your book, you list a lot of great resources and activities and things like that families can do. What are some of your favorite ones that you really recommend? Like, if families want to get started today, what would you recommend they do?
I mean, the one that I'm always getting told off for is to switch off the light when you leave a room. And then the answer is, well, I'm just going back in there. So this is an easy thing to do, is to switch off things that you don't use. Yeah. I mean, that's a bit. And then when it comes to, if you're cold, I think these days, if we're cold, we turn up the heating, and maybe we should be putting on a sweater. So it's these small actions that we can take which I think most people know these days, is to reduce your consumption, reduce your waste, try and save energy, save water. And the good thing is that you're not just saving the planet, because most of these things these days cost money. So it's actually benefiting your pocket as well. So there's an economic incentive to do that. So it's these kind of actions actions that we can do. And I guess the most important thing is using the voice, using the power that we have to inspire others to do the same, or to do some advocacy. We saw that very clearly with the children and the climate strikes, what they're doing. They have a voice and they're using that to raise the issue that they're concerned about climate change, and it's something that governments should tackle because they are the next generation.
Absolutely. And what a great way to start getting kids feeling passionate about it than a book about a relationship between a dad and his kid, or a kid and his kind of goofy, mixed up eco warrior dad that you tell us in your book. This has really been a fun conversation. Alexia, do you have any other questions for Gary?
I am all good, but I'm sure our listeners want to know, where can they find you? Where can they find your book?
Okay, so the book is available as an ebook, hard copy, and an audio book. And actually, I think, if I have to be honest, I really enjoy the audio book because the guy who did it is so funny. And these are all available on Amazon or at your independent bookstore to order. So they're out there, are available, and and be interesting to hear more people about what they think about this story.
Well, I'm going to give another plug for the audiobook, because audiobooks are great. For some 8-year-old, 10-year-olds, it might feel uncomfortable sitting down and reading a book aloud with your parents or your grandparents. And I don't want to talk about it. I've read that book and I'm tired. I just want to play in my game. But you're in the van, you're in the car with your kids anyways. So turn on that audiobook. What a great way to spend the 20 minutes that you're going to be together.
Yeah, maybe you're going to a hike, so you're driving and you listen to the Earth Warrior as you're about to go explore some nature.
That sounds like a great idea. And dads, remember, wear some clothes when you go fishing. Well, Gary, we've had a great time speaking to you. Thank you so very much for being with us.
Well, thank you. And it's been an honor to talk to you guys. And I hope more people can enjoy the Earth Warrior and learn about climate change and other environmental issues.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guests will be Parveen Kandarali and Tammy Coe. They are the co-creators of Diego the Dodo. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, want to thank our guest, Gary Hack. Be sure to check out My Dad, the Earth Warrior. Also want to thank my amazing co-host, Alexia Brown. Want to thank my team, Alejandro Doherty, Fatima Khan. Want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. See you next time on the Reading with Your Kids podcast.